LGR's Talking Property is brought to you in association with the Kings Group, your local high street property business that delivers on results and service. We'll get you moving. The views and opinions expressed on LGR's Talking Property are those of the host, guests and contributors and are not necessarily those of London Greek Radio. While all facts, figures and statistics are carefully researched, listeners should check before taking any action based on information and advice offered in this programme. LGR's Talking Property with Karl Knipe.
Good evening and welcome to LGR's Talking Property, the monthly live discussion on all things property. Tonight we are looking at the Fitness for Human Habitation Bill that comes into effect on the 20th of March this month. What does this mean if you're a landlord, and what if you're a tenant? Was it a necessary legislation, and is it a good thing? Will this only strengthen a tenant's position and make it more difficult for landlords to evict bad tenants? We're also going to briefly touch on property guardians. I want to bring up the subject as it's an area of the rented sector that's growing. You may not know what property guardians are. You may see them as the saviour of rising rents, primarily in the capital, or you may view them as just another way that unscrupulous landlords are evading ensuring that accommodation is fit for human habitation. We'll bring this subject in the latter part of the hour. With me to discuss, debate and give their expert views and thoughts, I have two highly knowledgeable guests this evening. Firstly, Sian Berry, elected as a Green Party member of the London Assembly in 2016 and has been a councillor for the Highgate ward in Camden since 2014. Sian is passionate about securing council housing, properly affordable rents and making sure tenants, have a say over what happens to their homes. She believes that all Londoners should be secure in their homes and feels that they are part of the community that they can enjoy, shape and design. Sian supports private renters, estate residents, campaigns within communities across London and chairs the Housing Committee in the London Assembly. Good evening, Sian.
Good evening.
Also with us is Meera Chindoorroy. Meera joined the National Landlords Association, known as the NLA, in May 2018. Having previously worked in both policy development and project management for a range of not-for-profit and public sector organisations. In her role as the Policy and Public Affairs Manager, Meera provides political insight both internally and for NLA members and lobbies in their best interests. She has extensive experience of building partnerships with stakeholders across communities, civil society and government, as well as developing collaborative approaches to policy challenges. Prior to joining the NLA, Meera provided policy and engagement support to the Chief Executive of the Big Lottery Fund. It's great to have you join us this evening, Meera.
Thanks very much, Carl.
Remember, we do want you to get involved tonight with your thoughts and comments. You can text us on 0737 66 11033 or tweet at LGR Talk Property and put your questions and comments to Meera and Sian. It's your show. So, what is the Fitness for Human Habitation Bill? When was it conceived? By who? And why do we need it? Sian.
Right, well, this took quite a long time to get approved, actually. It was first proposed in 2015 by the Labour MP Karen Buck, and what she'd spotted was essentially a loophole that had developed in housing law that effectively meant, let me get this right, only tenancies of more than 7 years were actually susceptible to these requirements that homes should be fit for human habitation. They'd been sort of allowed to wither away because of that, and only the new health and safety laws applied. And health and safety laws require the same levels of decentness about homes. So this is no hazards, things like fire safety and CO2 and no damp and, a bathroom that works and things like that. But these were only enforceable by councils and not by tenants. So although it was like a legal requirement to have them, the enforcement could only be through councils. So what Karen Buck's bill sought to do was bring that into just normal law so that tenants could go and take legal action to make their landlord get a court to order their landlord to fix things, whereas before they'd have had to get the council to do that action against the landlord. So it seems like it can't be that bad for landlords. It's asking them to do things they should be doing anyway, and they could be enforced against anyway, and to just have homes at a decent standard. But it does give another route for tenants to enforce directly against their landlords, which might worry some, but not if they're keeping their homes fit for human habitation.
Right. So who's that? So when you say landlords, which sort of landlords is it going to initially impact then?
Well, I mean, any landlord that's leaving a serious health and safety hazard and not getting it fixed up, now their tenant who might have reported them to the council, but the council's too busy, and the councils are really stretched at the moment. We're finding that on all sorts of levels. That tenant can then go and get legal aid to get it sorted out.
Is that for existing tenancies or new tenancies?
Now, let me get this right. It's just for new tenancies. Is that right? Except for ones that are longer term and rolling tenancies.
So the provisions of the Act will come into force from the 20th of March for any new tenancies signed from that date.
So if someone takes out a tenancy 1st of April, then this will apply?
Exactly, and that will include renewals. So if you've got a fixed term tenancy that you are renewing after that date, then that counts as a new tenancy. However, from 2020, March the 20th, it will apply to all tenancies, whether they existed prior to that date or not. So it will come into force for all tenancies, but there's a 12-month transition period for that.
I think that's quite important then for our listeners, if you're out there listening this evening. If you've got a tenant at the moment and there's a renewal coming up, this is you're going to become part of this very quickly. So you need to be aware of that fact. So when is it going to be extended to all? Is it going to be extended to all periodic tenancies?
Yep, from 20th of March 2020.
Okay. So, Meera, in your expert opinion, why has this legislation really been brought in?
I think there's a real issue at the moment in terms of tenants being able to get enforcement action, and while tenants who are living in the private rented sector can go to their councils, the level of enforcement from councils and local authorities is quite poor. And
all councils and local authorities?
The vast majority. Really? Not all, but there is a lack of enforcement and a lack of commitment of resources for various reasons. So this provides another avenue for tenants to pursue serious issues in their properties. And it's also important to note that it applies to both private tenants and social renting tenants.
That is really important, actually, because the current rules where you go to the council, the council can't enforce against itself. There's a legal issue there. So at the moment, people with health and safety issues within council properties have real trouble getting them sorted out.
Exactly.
I'm a local councillor, so I have that constantly all the time.
Yeah, so we're anticipating that really it will be social rented tenants who will most be able to take advantage of the provisions in this Act, because for the private rented tenants, they can go to their council, and councils do usually respond, but it's sort of the level of enforcement that they're doing. So you see that there aren't very many prosecutions against landlords, for example, although we know that there's a certain portion, a minority, but a certain portion of the sector who are providing homes that aren't fit at the moment.
So we're really talking about this legislation's been brought in to raise the standards, both in the PRS, private rental sector, and social housing. Is that
and to make sure that tenants have the right to bring.
So it's to give tenants more rights, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. They don't already have enough rights. Is that obviously?
They have their.
Someone's laughing. I don't know. I'm just asking.
Do you want me to list the rights that tenants don't have? I think they should.
No, I know that we've got listeners out there that are landlords, and they'll be thinking, they've got loads, but you tell us why.
I think
we've only got 45 minutes left, mind you. But.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is at the moment, it's the postcode lottery, that's the thing. So there's no point in having a right where the chances of you being able to exercise that right are more or less random, depending on which council you live under.
Because some are better at it than others.
Yeah, from a justice point of view, that isn't fair. And the government did recognise this. I mean, this is a private members' bill that was voted down in 2015, or pushed out of the time for legislation. Then people tried to bring it in as an amendment to the Housing and Planning Act in 2016. Loads of people tried to bring in loads of things as amendments to that Act, and that was voted down at that point. But then the government said it had sympathy with what it was trying to do and encouraged effectively a private members' bill to come forwards and said that they would give it some time the next time. So it was kind of a long debate that happened in the public. There was a backlash against the MPs when they first voted it down, and I think that really did sort of change their minds. There's a lot more. I think renters are getting a bit more activists now about the fact that they are having problems, and I think it's partly because we're paying an awful lot more rent now than we used to. I mean, I should stress, I am a private tenant, and I have been in London for 20 years, so I've been very
happy?
I've been very lucky in lots of ways, but I do recognise the insecurity that many tenants feel, and I have had problems getting things sorted out in the past where a few extra rights and a few more avenues to enforce it might just have got landlords to act more quickly to sort things out. So I think it will overall help to raise standards in the sector, as well as, I mean, it's not that we want lots of landlords to go to court and be fined. We'd rather the landlords were just providing the decent homes in the first place, and I think making this another right would be a good deterrent in lots of ways.
Meera, as you represent the landlords, do you not find that they're a little bit sceptical about this additional new law?
I think,
because you seem to be arguing that it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think there's a level of fear that we're hearing from our members about what it means, but the important message to send is that it hasn't changed what you're required to do at all. It just provides another avenue for enforcement, and for landlords who are compliant with the law, that's a good thing. We want there to be enforcement because the criminal landlords are getting away with it, and they're undercutting those landlords who are doing everything right. So having more avenues for enforcement is actually very beneficial.
I've done a little bit of research, speaking to some landlords, and mainly sort of what I call their non-professional landlords, people with 2, 3, 4 properties. Their sort of feeling is it not just a licence for rogue tenants and give them greater protection to hide behind?
I think one thing we are concerned about is the possibility of there being vexatious claims on the basis of this act. So if an issue is in a property because of a tenant's behaviour, that is not obviously the landlord's responsibility to remedy, but there could be issues, particularly with something like condensation and damp, where it's less clear what is the cause of the issue, and we're going to be keeping a close eye on the cases that come up to see whether there is a pattern emerging, but we'll have to see what happens once the law's in place.
Because talking about condensation, I know lots of situations where landlords constantly moaning about the tenants. I don't know whether this is right, only what they're saying, that tenants tend to basically dry their wash their clothes, dry them with all the windows shut, and then they get condensation and damp, and then they complain that it's the flat and the landlord's fault. Is that
we hear that quite commonly?
You do.
Or that tenants aren't using a ventilation,
or there's not the ventilation in there in the first place.
Well,
could be, can't
it could be, but that is probably a bit more of a grey area.
Right.
But the landlord should be providing the advice and the opportunity for the tenants to ventilate the home properly. However, if the tenant is keeping all the windows closed and drying their clothes inside the property, or not opening the window in the bathroom when there's a window there available, then that is obviously going to cause issues with condensation. So that issue of tenant behaviour is really something that we have to keep an eye on.
I wanted to stick on this because this is the point that I think that landlords from my chats with them are worried about. And I wanted to quote something very similar. Victoria Whitlock, who lets 4 properties in South London, said at the beginning of this month in Homes and Property, it's an online magazine, "Why in heaven's name do my tenants keep washing their cooking fat and grease down the kitchen sink when they must surely be aware that it clogs the drains? It happens so often that I'm thinking of investing in my own drain cleaning equipment and bump a pack of marigolds to save on plumbing fees." She made it quite funny, although it's not. "I wouldn't be so irritated, but every time the sink blocks or the water stops draining from the bath or washing machine, the tenants call me and act all innocent, like they haven't got a clue what has caused the problem. Surely this law protects the tenants' irresponsible behaviour further."
Well, it shouldn't do, because it's very clear in the law that if it's...
You can see this is where landlords are worried. You must have heard this, surely.
Absolutely. And I think that it was just as I said, it's a case of looking at what the case law is coming out from this issue. If we do see that pattern emerging, then we are definitely going to be pushing for some kind of amendment to the act to ensure that doesn't happen, because we don't want to encourage ambulance chasing, as they call them, solicitors who are seeking to take advantage of tenants, really, and push them to take their landlords to court for cases which have no bearing on the issue.
Okay.
Can I not retaliate exactly? But there is on the subject of damp. It is absolutely the tenant's experience that the moment you raise anything to do with damp, you are told you're not using your flat correctly by your landlord. And actually, with my colleague Caroline Russell on the London Assembly has been looking at this. Poor insulation and cold walls. So if you've got a wall that's damaged on the outside, getting very cold on the inside, that kind of thing is a damp magnet. Any kind of just normal breathing will lead to damp on that kind of wall.
But who decides though?
So hopefully the new legislation will then be something where it will be encouraged for the landlord to look to see if there's a structural problem that might be exacerbating damp, particularly if it's appearing in particularly one corner or one particular corner of the room. If it's generalised mould in the bathroom, that's more obvious that that's to do with people not ventilating. But if it's like a particular damp spot that's always appearing no matter what you do, that's likely to be structural, and we hopefully landlords will take that more seriously.
Hope so. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to carry this bit on because I'm enjoying this. Text us on 0737 66 11033, whether you agree with Sian and Meera or you disagree. We want to hear what you guys out there think, or message us on Twitter at LGR Talk Property. If you have a view, let's hear it.
You're listening to LGR's Talking Property.
I got something here.
LGR, London Greek Radio, the heartbeat of the Greek community.
Είστε έτοιμοι για τρελή διασκέδαση? Saturday 23rd of March, Greekology at Trent Park Country Club. Tickets selling fast. Join myself, the Mixmaster Andreas Michailidis and DJ Magis on the decks from 9 till 3 a.m. Greekology, fusing the very best in Greek club, modern lager, Greek classics, Zembekiga, reggaeton, alongside the biggest English hits of the decade. Doors open 9 p.m. Get your tickets now from lgr.co.uk. For VIP and table reservations, call 0208 349 6963. Saturday 23rd of March, a night of pure musical pleasure. LGR brings you Greekology. Sponsored by Evelina Beach Hotel Protaras, Michael Kipriano & Co. LLC, Plumbase Park Royal and Toyota Jemka Enfield.
Everyone knows the best deals don't hang around for long, so don't miss Jemka Toyota's 19-plate event on now. For a limited time only, enjoy up to 10% off selected new Toyotas, 0% finance now on key models, and be one of the first to test drive the all-new Corolla and all-new RAV4. The clock is ticking, so head straight to Jemka Toyota Enfield today. Terms and conditions apply.
Στις δύσκολες στιγμές που ακολουθούν την απώλεια ενός αγαπημένου προσώπου, εμπιστευτείτε το γραφείο κηδιών Δημητρίου & English. 30 χρόνια στην καρδιά της παροικίας. Έχουν την εμπειρία και αναλαμβάνουν με συνέπεια και επαγγελματισμό τη διοργάνωση της κηδείας του εκλειπώντος, καθώς και κάθε άλλης αναγκαίας πένθυμης τελετής ή ακόμη και τον επαναπατρισμό του αποβιώσαντος στον τόπο καταγωγής του. Και όλα αυτά σε ασυναγώνιστες τιμές. Και δεν είναι λόγια. Μπορούμε να συναγωνιστούμε οποιαδήποτε προσφορά. Τέλος, σας βοηθούμε στη συμπλήρωση των κατάλληλων εγγράφων και την κάλυψη των εξόδων κηδείας από το DSS. Δημητρίου & English. 30 χρόνια στο πλευρό της παροικίας. 888 99 888.
Kings Group has been in the high street for nearly 30 years. Agreeing a sale on your property is the easy part. Ensuring it completes and you move is the hard part in today's market. That's why we're here with you every step of the way, and there's no upfront fee. At Kings Group, we are local property experts with a proven track record. Kings have won over 50 Estes Awards for customer service, voted for by you, the public. We have also been awarded the FIFO Gold Service 2018 Award for outstanding service, voted again by our satisfied clients. We are motivated to move you with the minimum fuss in the quickest possible time while ensuring you are given the personal customer service and advice you deserve. Kings Group, with With branch offices across North London, East London, Hertfordshire and Essex, Kings Group offer a special discount of 20% to LGR listeners off all our standard fees. Simply mention LGR's Talking Property for further information. Please call on 01707 872 000 or visit www.kings-group.net. Kings Group, you only pay on results, not promises.
LGR's Talking Property with Karl Knipe.
Great to have you back with us. Sian, somebody who agrees with you. While we've been away, we've got a text in. Hi, I have experience of a horrendous landlord who would not agree to having my toilet fixed that would not flush for over a month. The smell and stench was sickening and there was nothing I could do other than threaten to withhold my rent. Does this mean I can get compensation? Meera, do you want to answer that one?
Yes, possibly. You'd have the right to take that case to the court, because one of the issues which is covered by this act is the drainage and provision of lavatories. So it would be a matter for the courts to decide if that is a bad enough hazard for the landlord to have to remedy it and to pay you compensation.
Okay. What is fit for human habitation? What's the definition of that?
There's a list of things that are necessary for things to be fit, and I can probably find that for you if you want.
Doesn't need to be all of them, but
it's just it's basic. It's a health and safety list.
It is.
So to have basic fire safety and CO2 and hazards like that avoided. To have basic. The basics of cooking facilities.
But aren't these already covered in existing legislation, though?
Yes, exactly. They're in they're the same list as is in the housing
in the Housing Act.
Yeah. So it's just what the change in the law is that the Housing Act previously was not saying that tenants could enforce this, but councils could.
Right.
And so the change in the law is
so that's really the only change.
Yeah. There's no change in the kind of home you should be providing if you're a landlord, or the kind of home you're entitled to if you're a tenant. You just have a new way of getting redress, getting it sorted out, and as we just found, potentially getting compensation if it's been neglected.
So we're going over the same ground again, but actually I think it's now forming a pattern. What you're really saying, this doesn't really affect landlords at all. It's mainly there purely to help the tenants.
If a landlord doesn't think they need to provide a toilet, then they might be in for a bit of a shock. But I think most landlords are quite well aware of the legislation now, including the new electrical safety things that they need to do. And there's a lot of new things that landlords have had to do in recent years, new hazards that people have.
Things like Legionnaire's disease testing.
Yeah,
like
carbon monoxide I think you have to test for now, as well as carbon dioxide. There's all kinds of things like that now landlords do, and if they're not doing them, then that needs to be sorted out.
Is it the fact though that the government, the Mayor of London, Assembly, is it the fact they're not really policing these issues? Is that more of an issue itself rather than bringing in more legislation?
I mean, ideally, councils would be all over this in terms of the way that the Housing Act says to do it under health and safety.
They haven't got that word resources.
But councils are really stuck. And if you are dependent on somebody else to enforce your rights, then that is a bit of an issue. If you've got a right, then you should be able really to enforce that yourself by taking people to court and getting a remedy. And that had been the case and wasn't anymore. So this is just essentially putting that right.
Right. Did tenants, the average person doesn't need more guidance and help rather than having to do it themselves, so to speak?
The average tenant?
Yes.
Most tenants are quite unaware of their rights, actually.
That's exactly what I mean.
One of the things I've been supporting across London is the idea of a renters' union, and that is in order that tenants have somewhere to go who will give them advice, but also act like a union does.
Yeah.
If you have a problem in your workplace, your union will bring a rep along and help you and give you advice on how to sort out your problem with your employer. At the moment, tenants don't really have anybody standing up for themselves.
They've got no National Tenants Association.
No, exactly. So it's essentially, I've been supporting the idea of essentially a renters' union or a renters' association to do that, to give people really good advice. And again, I'm a local councillor, there are council housing officers, there are citizens advice bureaus. All of these services are really overwhelmed at the moment because of all the different changes there have been to things like benefits and and other things like that just mean that trying to get an appointment at an advice centre like that is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So tenants are starting to organise a little bit more amongst themselves to make sure that they're more aware of their rights and supporting each other when things go wrong.
I've got another question coming in a text. I'm not too sure who to ask this one, but I'll put it out there first of all. Why is this Tory government continually kicking, shoving and bullying us private landlords? Feels another case of robbing the hard-working and thrifty people who'd saved while the rest have been spending with no care for tomorrow. Don't you understand that property is our pension? We were told to do this. Thieves! Exclamation mark. No name, mind you. Anybody want to answer that?
I mean, it is the case that a lot of people have invested in property, and they are using it as their pension, as the thing that they're using to save up for their pension. But that is a failing of the government, that they've felt compelled to do that, to be honest. And I think most landlords,
have they felt compelled, though? Have they been what's the word?
Well, there been such low interest rates, and the amount you gain on your pension at the moment is very, very low.
It is.
So you can see why somebody might feel a bit aggrieved. But I mean, to be honest, if you're a landlord and you own a property, then that property is increasing in price. You're also taking rents from people every month, and those rents are higher than they've ever been. You have more obligations on you than you used to in terms of providing things. But if people don't want to do the job of being a landlord that is quite well paid, both in capital gains and in rents, then maybe they shouldn't be doing that. But I think it is a bit harsh to be so cross at having obligations put on you to provide a decent home. If you are a landlord and you're serious about being a landlord, you should be providing the absolute basics of it. You wouldn't want, in any other job, you wouldn't say, well, I want to be a bus driver, but I'd rather not drive a bus. That's not quite how it works, is it? You have to be doing the job.
I think I'd slightly disagree with you on there.
Well, I think... please carry on. Go on.
Certainly, landlords are offering a service. They are business owners at the end of the day, and they have a responsibility to provide safe and secure homes to their tenants. But the listener was absolutely right that the government has been putting a lot of new regulations on landlords and without much structure to it. So there have been a whole range of regulations which have come in even in the short time that I've been working on housing, and that landlords have had to adapt to and take on board. And it's really a concern of our members that they just feel that they're being pushed upon increasingly by the government. They are contributing to the economy. They are providing homes to people who might not otherwise be able to afford to live in certain areas, or who can't access social housing, for example. That is a benefit to society, and I think the government should recognise that and consider the impact of the policies which they're introducing and the regulations that they're introducing on landlords' willingness to offer properties.
I think.
Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, no, I think because we're looking at one act in isolation, really. But I think the problem is, I mean, some of the things I've got down here was landlords feel a bit victimised. They feel like they're sort of outcast by the government. In times gone by, being a landlord was sort of systematic with being entrepreneurial, but it feels more like that landlords have become synonymous with greed, and I think that's not just one thing, and this is just another problem, something else that we've now got to deal with, another hurdle they've got to get over. And I think that's the sort of feeling that I get out from the landlord community. I'm
keen to see landlords professionalise in general, but I think one area where we do agree is the right to rent legislation, which has just been challenged in the courts. That's the legislation that was asking landlords to basically make immigration checks on their tenants. Yeah. We're in fear of being fined, I think, £30,000 per tenant that they didn't check on properly, or where they were fooled by some false papers or something like that. Yep. With absolutely no excuses. If they made a mistake, that was going to be the fine. I went to landlords forums where presumably good landlords turn up to forums like that the councils run, but there was a lady there from the border agency giving them the lowdown on this new policy that was coming in, and they were all absolutely horrified. Now that hopefully will be struck down and stop happening, because that's something I don't think is part of being a landlord. No. Things that are part of being a landlord, I think the more we can try and professionalise what's going on, the more we can make sure tenants are protected and given a good home, then great. If you can make a business out of that, that's fine. I do see different attitudes from some landlords, though. Some landlords, I've had the attitude sent back to me that, no, all I want is a low hassle investment opportunity. And if you make me act like a landlord, effectively is what they're saying, if you make me do this work, then I'll get out. And I just think that those kinds of landlords who don't really want to do the work of making sure that a tenant has a decent home and offering a service, maybe they're not best cut out to be landlords. More professional ones, I'm totally on board with, and I talk to, and we're happy to talk about what is too much and what isn't and all of that. But if you're going to have that attitude, and if you're going to chuck that attitude back at me on Twitter just by saying tenants should have more security, then I'm not pleased.
I think we need to recognise there's over 2 million landlords in the UK, and there's a wide range of types of landlords and reasons for being in the sector. Their motivations differ, the types of tenants they let to differ, their portfolios differ dramatically. So we need to, I think, stop talking about landlords as this kind of unilateral group of people when actually there's
the problem is it's like football supporters. They get judged by the 5 or 6 hooligans or whatever that go on, etc., etc. And I think the problem is that a lot of landlords sort of feel aggrieved. I was listening to what Sian say. Do you think it's that landlords have basically had it too easy for too long then, i.e. making money too easy, and now they've got to stand up and actually put their money where their mouth is?
Like I said, this part of the Housing Act was enforced and was allowed to wither away, and I think there has been quite a lot of removal of regulations, or landlords have not been subject to the same kinds of regulations as say social landlords, for example. And so private rented housing, if you look at the actual facts on the ground about the condition of private rented housing, for example, there's a higher proportion of private rented homes that are non-decent than social rented homes, than owner-occupied homes, and that has been allowed to happen because of the lack of attention, the lack of enforcement, the lack of regulation potentially. So we're trying to bring things up to the same standards as other tenures, on average. So the landlords that are already providing things that are a good standard don't need to worry. The ones who are not, we are going to try and get you to improve the kind of homes you're providing, because things like fuel poverty are absolutely rife in the private rented sector, when that's going down in other tenures because people are incentivised to deal with
when
it.
you say fuel poverty, what do you mean, to tell our listeners?
So fuel poverty is when you're paying out, it's a technical definition, but it's when you're paying out more than 10% of your income for fuel bills.
Right.
And that is defined as being too much, essentially, to cope with, because you're expected to pay for food and travel and all those, and rent and all those other things.
Surely that's governed though by what your income is.
Yes, it is. Poverty is always a relative term. So what it means is a lot of people who are very poor are also having to pay a significant proportion of their quite low incomes out in heating bills, because their homes are poorly insulated, because they've got leaky windows and all of that. And if you're a private tenant, there's not much you can do about that if your landlord isn't willing to improve things. Owner-occupiers have had grants they can claim to get insulation and eco grants and things like that. They've also got the incentive of, this is a property they want to live in for the long term, so they will invest in it. Private renters, even if they want to live in the homes for the long term, don't have the ability to make the improvements that they might need, which might pay off within 3 years. If you can reduce your energy bills by like 30%, the investment you might need to make in just making the windows draft proof might be well worth it.
I appreciate it, but Meera, are landlords really bothered about their tenants' income as long as they're paying their rent?
I think landlords...
Should they be?
Yes. Tenants' fuel bills do not affect a landlord's bottom line, so why would they invest in it? That's the issue.
Well, I think landlords the landlords who want to have good tenants and who want to offer a good quality of property will want to have those issues dealt with, and will want their tenants to enjoy living in the home and to make a home there. So issues like windows not being sealed properly, that sort of thing encourages tenants to stay for longer. From a landlord's point of view, you want to avoid having void periods. You want your tenant to be continuing to pay their rent. You want to have a good tenant who will look after the property. That's your capital. So you actually do want a tenant to stay for a long time, because you know them, you have a relationship with them, and you can build that up. So responding to those kind of complaints is actually in the landlord's interest and in the long term. obviously not all landlords will do that, but that's where some of these enforcement actions are helpful, because they do offer tenants that opportunity to either go to the council or to seek enforcement themselves.
Okay. We're going to go to a break. We're going to talk property guardians.
You're listening to LGR's Talking Property.
The Hellenic Nights London και το Showtime Promotions presents Paola for the first time in the UK. Σάββατο 30 Μαρτίου στο London Park Lane Hilton Mayfair W1. Live until 5:30 a.m. For info and reservations 073 99 60 2018 ή στο 077 71 87 1066 ή στο email info@hellenicnights.com. Sponsored by the Park Lane Club Mayfair W1, London Park Lane Hilton and greeklist.co.uk.
LGR, the heartbeat of the Greek community.
Η Alpha Cleaning Services είναι μια εταιρεία εμπιστοσύνης με πείρα μεγαλύτερη των 10 χρόνων στην παροικία, που προσφέρει υπηρεσίες γενικού καθαρισμού σε γραφεία, επιχειρήσεις και σχολεία.
Ειδικεύεται στον καθαρισμό των χαλιών. Υπογράφοντας συμβόλαιο διάρκειας 1 έτους, έχετε εντελώς δωρεάν τον καθαρισμό των χαλιών σας. Παίρνετε έκπτωση 10% αναφέροντας το London Greek Radio.
Η Alpha Cleaning Services καλύπτει επίσης και περιοχές εκτός Λονδίνου, καθώς και άλλες πόλεις. Alpha Cleaning Services.
Για πληροφορίες καλέστε Βόρειο Λονδίνο 0203 295 8888 ή 079 1788 6700. Για το Νότιο Λονδίνο καλέστε 0203 295 8889.
Are you ready to party Bouzoukia style? Stamatis Gonidis and his band, together with Eleni Khadzidou, are coming to London for one night only. Saturday, 6th of April at the Royal Regency, Manor Park, London, E12. Do not miss out. Get your tickets now. Contact odeonentertainment.co.uk or call 075 76 419391. Make sure you are part of what promises to be a night to remember. Stamatis Gonidis and Eleni Khadzidou. Saturday, 6th of April at the Royal Regency, Manor Park. Doors open at 10 p.m.
LGR's Talking Property with Karl Knipe.
Property Guardians. Sounds like the title of a new sci-fi film. Sian, what are they and who are they?
Well, property guardians
They're not from out in the sky, no?
No, unfortunately not. They are people who live in empty buildings, ones that are going to be empty for a temporary period usually. Sometimes they're residential buildings.
Such as, give me an example.
So, for example, quite a lot of property guardians are currently living in flats in council estates that are planned to be demolished.
Ah, right.
So the flats are going to be demolished, so they're being emptied out of council tenants who are going elsewhere. They're being bought off the leaseholders, and meanwhile, they're being, for security reasons, essentially, that's why they're called property guardians. People are living in them temporarily to keep them going and not have them left empty completely and rot away. And also people live in property guardians in empty commercial buildings, empty schools, hospitals, care homes. Those sorts of places will have property guardians placed in them. It's quite a new thing. I mean, essentially,
are they not run down though? A lot of these buildings.
Yeah, they are. I mean,
we're talking about fitness for human habitation, and this to me sounds like it's the completely other end of the scale.
It started. It comes from it's not to do with tenancies. It comes out of the security industry effectively. So normally you'd have in the old days you'd have a security guard who might live in the property just to keep an eye on it, and that security guard might be just paid a job to do that. Instead of that, a few years ago, what happened was companies got wind of the fact they could charge people to live in these buildings.
Why not?
Give them a few duties like locking the doors at night, and make money off them rather than having to pay them to do a job. And this again was something that started out being artists, bohemian type people. Yeah, I'll have a whole floor of an old school because I'm an artist. I like the space. I can practice my dancing or whatever it is. That's the sort of picture you used to have of it. But unfortunately, it's grown and grown and grown. And so now there are we looked at this in the London Assembly and we found around 7,000 people were living in London as property guardians.
7,000?
7,000 people.
Is this a new phenomenon, Meera?
This is relatively new, It's quite recently grown up.
It is. Is it, and is this going to be covered by the Fitness for Human Habitation?
No, exactly. The key thing of this is these are not tenants. These people...
But they are tenants.
They pay a licence fee to live in these property guardian properties. This doesn't entitle them to a tenancy over a period of time. It's very temporary. Often they were given very little notice. We've now managed to establish, hopefully in law, that they are having to be given 28 days notice to leave, but always just 28 days at the very most, and a lot were given a couple of weeks, and they're moved around quite a lot. They might only get 3 months in one place, and then the guardian company might find them another place for 6 months. So it's quite a peripatetic lifestyle, and the rents, which started out being very, very cheap in exchange for living in a quite grotty place, are going up and up and up. So quite often now people are paying close to market rents for living in a place with much, much fewer rights than a real tenant as a licensee. Often some health and safety and repairs issues. Often they're quite cold. So we wanted to look at this in the London Assembly and looked at what the problems were. We commissioned some research from York University.
You came up with 11 recommendations.
We've got 11 recommendations, but I won't tell you all of them.
No, please don't. Where can we find them?
But we on the london.gov.uk, look for property guardians, and you'll find a really interesting report which says, it's not artists anymore. It's people who work. A lot of people who work in poorly paid jobs, people who work in intermittent jobs like acting sometimes still, but also people who work in care homes, people who work as security guards, people in absolutely normal jobs, and getting older as well. People are doing it for longer in life because it's harder and harder to get a place to rent that's decently cheap. So we worry that this is going to become a sort of substandard second tier tenancy that will undercut the private rented market, undercut it on all kinds of standards, unless something is done to regularise this and bring in more of the rules.
You can see why. I mean, I'm not sure how many landlords out there are aware of property guardians, but you can see why they'd be sort of even more angry now than the beginning part of the programme, because now they're thinking, well, God, we've now got all these extra things to do. These guys are just getting away with, renting out floors, areas or whatever for less money, less responsibility, and now we've got another load of responsibility as they see it. I know we've debated it and said it's not, but on top
they live in an almost completely legal grey area. A lot of property guardians are very unaware of what rights they have. So it does completely threaten to create a substandard market for private housing that is undermining what's going on with the improvements to the private rented sector.
I saw a recent article by Vicky Spratt in iNews titled "The Hidden Housing Crisis." She spoke to NHS staff, teachers and low-income workers to reveal the realities of being a property guardian. She looked at a few properties employing guardians, one of which was a now disused Harrington Hill Primary School site in North East London, Upper Clapton, Hackney. You probably know that, your areas to some degree. She found that in some issues, such as one kitchen between 30 people and not even an oven. So I go back to saying, if you're a landlord, you're thinking, well, hold on a minute, this can't be all happening, and in the meantime we've got 30 people living in one place with one kitchen and no oven.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and then those kinds of conditions, shouldn't be there. People shouldn't be living in those kind of conditions, particularly not for close to market rents and for very low security. We do need to do something about this. So we're talking at the moment to ministers. We're talking to potentially lords who might sponsor something like the Fitness for Human Habitation bill, to get something put through in legislation just to bring licensees into more of the health and safety laws, more of the protections that private tenants have. I mean, recognising that it's a temporary thing and therefore maybe not all of the standards should apply. You'd struggle to bring a school up to decent homes standards, for example.
Well, that's exactly it.
HMO type standards, they really ought to be applying.
So why are they not classed?
Houses of multiple occupation.
Yeah, sorry. Why are they not classed as houses of multiple occupation?
Some are. It totally depends. So, it's a bit, again, it's a grey area.
There's a lot of grey areas.
But yeah, there's a lot. There's if you have a certain number of people living there, or it's a certain type of property, you can classify it as a house of multiple occupation. But some of these are whole flats, and that's again really difficult to classify.
Do you get many inquiries, or do you get many discussions from the National Landlords Association about?
I think
property
from
guardians?
Our point of view as the National Landlords Association, this is a completely different area of the market. We want to be clear that this isn't private renting.
It sounds rogue.
It essentially is. Yeah. If this was happening if this was happening in the private rented sector, it would be criminal. But because...
So how have we ended up with 7,000 people living in London in potentially something that will be criminal in the private rented section?
Because the property guardians make sure, or don't always, but try to make sure that the people living in the properties are on licences, and that means that they don't have exclusive use of the property. So, for example, a property guardian manager would be moving you from different rooms to ensure that you don't have exclusive use.
But we've got something called government in this country that's supposed to protect people, and if you've got 7,000 people on whose watch, who's been sleeping to allow this to creep up to this gigantic number?
Yeah, and it's so interesting that a lot of it's the public sector buildings, things like old fire stations and schools and council flats that are going to be demolished. That is a lot of the market for this. So we've got, amazing. On the one hand, the council buildings, and we've had some really bizarre situations where the tenants do have the protection under the health and safety parts of the Housing Act, and so they want to complain to the council about the conditions that they're living in under their property guardian company that's leasing it off the council and renting it back to them on a licence, and they're being told by their company that they're not allowed to complain to the council because the council is their landlord. And because there's very little guidance out there for people, it's been an absolute nightmare for some people. The other thing, you're not supposed to have guests overnight because you're sort of protecting it and property and looking after it as a property, and you're not supposed to have children living in these kinds of conditions. And we've had cases of property guardians who've got pregnant and lived long term in the flats, so they've brought a child into the world and they've brought a child into the flat therefore, and that's been really difficult because the guardian companies tried to evict them, and it's just because they're living in a regular flat that's going to be demolished. That's been a really difficult situation to try and deal with, and again a legal grey area that was very hard to work out.
Another issue is that local authorities have also been using property guardian properties to provide temporary accommodation. So because you can.
So as long as it suits them, it's okay, yeah?
Well, I think that there
Let's
is
turn
an
a blind
issue
eye to this when it suits us.
where the accommodation you should be providing should be up to standard, and it's not reasonable to expect someone to be
the
living
licence concept is a lot of people who go into hostels rent on a licence, and that makes sense because it's very temporary for you and all of that. But it's been extended now to people who live quite long term in these flats that sit for a few years waiting demolition.
I'd like to come back to this in another show, I think, in a few months' time, because I think we've probably opened up a little can of worms here. But going back to Fitness for Human Habitation Bill, Meera, what could you say to landlords out there to put their minds at rest, finally, as we start to wrap up?
What I would emphasise to landlords is this Act doesn't change any of the requirements that you have. The standards that you need to meet are the same standards today as they will be on the 20th of March. So don't fear that this is making you reach a new standard. It does provide for tenants to be able to take cases to court if they feel that their property isn't up to standard. But we do think that the vast majority of private tenants will seek to use the council enforcement processes, which already exist and which landlords will be familiar with. So, yeah, just to make the emphasis that this Act doesn't change the actual standards that they need to meet.
Sean, what would you say to tenants?
I would say to tenants, if you have a serious health and safety issue in your flats, or if you're moving into a flat and you discover one, after the 20th of March, you have new ways of dealing with it, and you should be...
should they not go to their letting agent first? Is there not a process that, rather than just...
absolutely. Try and get your landlord to sort out any
agent, landlord,
etc.
But if
health
not,
hazards. But if they refuse you or they're no use to you, then you have another way of getting help. A solicitor can help you. You should be able to get legal aid to challenge it. So it's a good thing.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's been really good. We'd also like to hear from you guys out there. Any features or any other topics you'd like us to discuss over the coming months, please let us know. Again, you can text us on 07376611033 or tweet us at LGR Talk Property with your ideas. It's your show. Thank you very much, Sian, Meera. It's been excellent having you here this evening. I think we've got some great information out there to you guys, the listeners. We are back Wednesday the 3rd of April at the same time. Till then, take care, enjoy life and be good.
LGR's Talking Property was brought to you in association with the Kings Group, your local high street property business that delivers on results and service. We'll get you moving. The views and opinions expressed on LGR's Talking Property are those of the host, guests and contributors and are not necessarily those of London Greek Radio. While all facts, figures and statistics are carefully researched, listeners should check before taking any action based on information and advice offered in this programme. LGR's Talking Property is presented by Karl Knipe and produced by London Greek Radio.